everyone, it's Jenny from Team Sunshine, and today on YouTube we thought we would do something slightly different, which is a sew-along, and it's for one of our favourite sewing patterns. It's quite a new one. It's from Megan Nielsen and it's the Durban Jumpsuit, and I am sewing it up in a pale blue washed cotton from the Sew Me Sunshine shop, and I will be showing you everything I get on with. So first up, we have everything that we need to make this pattern. So the supplies that you'll need are 2 spools of thread, interfacing and buttons. I've chosen the ginger buttons from Merchant & Mills to pair with my pale blue washed cotton. So first things first, I am preparing my paper pattern, and as you can see here, it is a lovely white tissue paper that comes in the Megan Nielsen patterns, and here I am cutting out the notches to remind me to cut them when I'm cutting out my fabric. I'm making version B, which is a wide leg V-neck sleeveless jumpsuit. Instead of the patch pockets, I'm doing inseam pockets. So I'm just looking at the cutting layout inside the pattern instruction booklets before I get cutting. I'm using pattern weights and a rotary cutter to cut out my pattern pieces. And sometimes I will use scissors if it's like a tricky corner, but this is always my preferred method of cutting out. I'm also cutting out all the interfacing at this point, and will be ironing it on before I get started sewing. This next step is to mark the darts onto the wrong side of the bodice. This just helps to sew them up, and you can follow the lines and pin through each line as well. It's time to start the best part of the project, which is obviously sewing it up and just preparing my machine, getting it all threaded, winding my bobbin, and here we go. So you begin by constructing the bodice, which is sewing the darts and sewing the side seams and sewing the shoulder seams. At this point I have sewn the facings onto the bodice and understitched, and now I am just top stitching around, and this is what you can see here. And that's the bodice fully constructed. Next step is to start on the trousers. Here I have sewn on the pockets, and I'm now matching them up with their front and back legs. The Durban jumpsuit pattern has a really interesting pocket construction, and you sew down to a certain point, then you stop, and then you leave a gap for the pocket opening, and then you carry on sewing down the rest of the leg, and the top of the pocket is then caught into the bodice when you attach them together. The next step is to join the bodice to the trousers, and you can see here I'm pinning through the side seams to make sure all the lines are matching up. The next step is to pin on the front facing and lining up the front pointed corners and the bottom of the button placket. You sew all the way around the facing, pivoting at the corners, and then you stop at your marking on the front facing. The next step is to understitch the facing, and you won't be able to reach all the points, so you just get as close as you can and then stop and then carry on. The next step is to top stitch the facing down, so before you do that, if you'd like to add a label, now's your chance. And you will start at the bottom of your button placket and pivot, and you'll meet that around on the other side and pivot again. and I find it useful to draw a line on so I know where to stop stitching. I use the friction pens which have the felt tip nib, and they come in lots of different colours. I would recommend testing them on your fabric first to make sure they don't leave any marks afterwards. These ones are iron off, so after I've finished sewing I will go around my project and iron off all the lines. The next step is to top stitch the triangle on top of the button plackets. This is to reinforce that joining seam, and I've drawn mine on so that I have a guide so that I can follow it round whilst I'm sewing. Now it's time to sew on your buttonholes and then sew on your buttons, and then you're nearly done. I recommend using fray check on the washed cottons. They're a little bit like linens, and the buttonholes will fray a little bit, and fray check will just mean that they last a little bit longer. The last step is to try on your jumpsuit and decide the length of the hem. I wore my jumpsuit around for a day before hemming it so that I could decide which length I wanted, and I've hemmed mine just above the ankle. And here are some photos of it. I hope you enjoy sewing the Durban jumpsuit, and let us know if you use one of our fabrics, and we'll see you next week.